graduated from Gregorian in 2013, and she is now a legal executive with Flipkart Bangalore. She holds degrees in law from NUALS Kochi and Azim Premji University Bangalore. With experience from some of the best universities and companies, she will talk to us about the various paths available to those interested in studying law. Sneha, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. So before I begin, am I audible, everyone? Renu Miss, am I audible and am I visible?
Yes, yes, you are, Sneha.
Perfect,
Go ahead.
perfect. Okay, so just a heads up. So when I saw the other presentations, what I noticed is probably when you're putting the questions in the chat, while I'm presenting, I may not be able to see it. But once I'm done with the presentation, I'll definitely go through the chat. And if there's any question, just put it there. I'll answer it towards the end. Is that fine with everyone? I'll just share my screen and start presentation. Okay, is this visible to everyone?
Yeah.
Yes, Sneha.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm Sneha Matthew. As Renuma said, I'm from the 2013 Gregorian batch, so I come like your super senior. Obviously, none of you have seen me, but yeah. And I currently work as a legal executive with Flipkart. But so just a month ago, I was working with a law firm. So I'll tell you exactly how this is different, working with a company, working with a law firm. As I go through the presentation, I'm trying to make that point clear to you guys. So yeah, so as you would have guessed, I'm a lawyer. So what did I do? I did BA LLB honors from the National Law University of Kochi, which is NUALS. Its acronym is NUALS. It's National University of Advanced Legal Studies. So that's the National Law University of Kochi. There are other national law universities in different states. I'll be explaining that later. And I'm really glad that Noel and Gayatri already mentioned Azim Premji University in their presentation, so that makes my job easier. So I did LLM, which is post-graduation for law, from Azim Premji University in Bangalore. And I specialize in cyber law, data protection and privacy, e-commerce law, which is something that Flipkart really needs, and entertainment law. So entertainment law would mean movie productions, OTT platforms. I'm sure you're aware of Netflix and all. So all that requires entertainment law. So I also specialize in that. Now, the most important question, how to be a lawyer in India? Now, where to study? That is something that you guys will be probably thinking about, where to study after school. There are so many choices that it is mind-boggling. Again, my knowledge is very limited, I must say. I know so many choices, but obviously if you research, you'll get way more choices out there. I'm aware of the national law universities. As I said, I studied in one national law university myself. There are 23 national law universities in India. I'll be speaking about that in detail later. There are state government colleges, like for instance, the Ernakulam Government Law College, Trivandrum Government Law College. Then there is one in Mumbai, which is very famous, GLC Mumbai. So there are many state government law colleges. Private universities and colleges are there. Azim Premji University is a private university. Similarly, Christ Bangalore has a law program. So there are many private universities and colleges. Foreign universities are also there, definitely. But there is a catch to that. So if you're doing so unlike engineering, again, so law, just like engineering and medicine, is a professional course. But unlike engineering and medicine, law is a very jurisdictional course. In the sense, you can't study the law in India and go to US directly and start practicing. Similarly, you can't study the US law and come directly to India and start practicing. So my personal advice would be, if you're taking the undergraduate program, do it in India, because then you get the first-hand knowledge of Indian law. So you can definitely study in a foreign university, come back to India and practice, but it's a more difficult route, because to practice in India, you need to enroll in the Bar Council, and Bar Council only recognizes Indian universities. So if you're studying from abroad, you get a BA LLB honors from abroad and then come here, you need extra certifications and licenses. You have to apply separately to the Bar Council for their permission to enroll, which again is very discretionary. The Bar Council may or may not allow you to enroll. So in order to avoid all that hassle, it's always easier to get a degree from India. We have eminent universities in India. So, but again, there's no stopping you from going abroad for an LLM. Post-graduation abroad has no problem. But again, even undergraduate, there's no problem, but it's a little more easier than doing undergraduate abroad. Now, what I'm very familiar with is a national law university, so I'll begin with that. As I said, there are 23 national law universities in India. The first national law university was established in Bangalore. Its acronym is NLSIU, National Law School of India University. It's a very long acronym, but then we can just say NLSIU. So NLSIU Bangalore is also ranked the highest in India, followed by Nalsar in Hyderabad, which is the NLU in Telangana, followed by NLU in Delhi. So these always come in the top 3 in ranking. NLU Kochi usually comes somewhere in the top 10, but again, the ranking every year, different places bring out the ranking, and ranking always keeps differing, fluctuating. So I can't really say where it is this year, but it always comes on the top 10. Again, when I was doing LLB, which was, I started in 2013. So back then there were only 14 national law universities. Now, because of the increased demand, they've actually made it up to 23. Another important thing to note is every state has only one national law university. Not all states have national law university. As you can see, there is only 23 in number. But again, every state in Kerala, there's only one national law university. Similarly, Hyderabad, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, all of these states, South Indian states, most of them have. Some North Indian states also have. Now, admission to the National Law University is based on CLAT ranking. So CLAT, I'll be talking about it in detail. That's the entrance test for getting into an NLU. Every NLU except NLU Delhi. So NLU Delhi has a different entrance exam for the admission process, which again, I'll detail about that later. So this is just an overview of what exactly an NLU is. Now, what is CLAT? So CLAT's full form is Common Law Aptitude Test. So just like how you have a national level entrance exam for engineering and medicine, you have a national level entrance exam for law. So that is a CLAT. And it is for the 22 NLUs in India, except NLU Delhi. Now, another important thing is, so if you've decided, okay, I don't want to go into an NLU, I want to just go to a private university, that's also fine. But you must remember that if you're going for merit-based seating in a private law university also, they also take CLAT into consideration. So Christ and all, I think they still take CLAT into consideration. So all merit-based seatings are based on CLAT. So it's always safer to write CLAT anyway, even if you're choosing to go to a private university or college. Now, that is about CLAT UG. So CLAT UG is what you write soon after your 12th to do the undergraduate program. Now, NLUs not just offer undergraduate programs, they also offer postgraduate programs, LLM programs, PG and PhD and everything. Diploma programs are also there. Now, for getting into a PG program in an NLU, a national law university, you still have to write CLAT PG, which is another entrance, national level entrance. Now, that is also important because for public sector undertakings like ONGC, BHEL and all, taking into their legal department, they actually look into CLAT ranking. So all their recruitments are based on CLAT ranking. So after, I've seen a lot of my friends, they after completing their undergraduate program, they write CLAT PG, not because they want an LLM, they want to get into ONGC or BHEL or something. So in that way also CLAT is being used. Now, how and when to take CLAT? Now, CLAT, you have to take it after your 12th grade. You have to pass 12th and you have to get your marks before getting admission into a college. You don't have to get your marks before getting writing the exam per se, but you have to appear for your 12th grade exams. CLAT can only be written by Indian nationals and NRIs. Foreign nationals cannot write CLAT. However, some national law universities, not all national law universities, some national law universities have seats for foreign nationals, but foreign nationals will have to apply separately to those universities. That's a separate procedure, not via CLAT. So their procedure for admission is very different. You'll have to separately check if that national law university have seats for foreign nationals or not. Again, so like I said, you have to appear for your 12th marks, 12th grade exams. However, it's important and it might be relieving for most to know that 12th marks per se are not important in CLAT ranking. You have to pass, you have to get a minimum of 45% marks for general category and 40% marks for SC and ST. But that is not counted into the ranking for CLAT. That's just for admission purposes. Also, another very relieving thing is that there is no upper age limit for CLAT. Now, that was not the case when I was writing. When I was writing, only people till the age of 19 could appear for CLAT. But then a case came in where they asked, why is this age limit there and all that. And finally, now for writing CLAT, you don't really have an upper limit for age. So you can write it at any age. However, because it's a 5-year program and there is also 3-year programs available in some colleges, people, older people, sometimes people choose to write, get into a law college after retirement and all that. So people who generally do that choose the 3-year degree course just because it's easier that way. They can complete it quicker. But CLAT per se does not put that restriction. You have no age restrictions for writing CLAT. Now, before writing, obviously, like engineering and medicine, it's always better to first take coaching for CLAT. There are lots of coaching centers available. When I was writing it in 2013, again, the awareness about CLAT and the number of people appearing for it was lesser than what it is now. It was still competitive, but it's much lesser. It was much lesser. So the number of coaching centers were also very limited. When I was writing it, there were 3 coaching centers in Kochi. That's it. But now I understand from my general awareness, I'm not very sure of the exact number, but I'm aware that the number of people writing CLAT have increased so much over the years. So the number of coaching centers have also gone up, and the difficulty level of the exam, CLAT, has also gone up. So it's always better to go for coaching before writing CLAT. Obviously, it's not that difficult. If you are very confident you can crack it without a coaching, well and good. But I would always say it's safer to go for coaching. So there are 2-year coachings available. You can start it in your 11th grade, go through your 11th and 12th. I did a crash course, doesn't mean that's a safe choice. I just took a very risky choice, but it's always safer to go for the both 2-year coaching program in coaching centers. Now the exam is usually held in May. I wrote it in May back in 2013. However, this year, because of COVID and everything, I hear that they have extended it and now it's being held in July. But that's not generally how it is held. It's usually held in May, and admission processes are usually done by June, and by July our classes start. So yeah, but usually it's done in May, but this year it's in July. So, and it usually, again, these are all general things that I know. I don't know how specifically it's happening now. Again, for these things, going to a coaching center helps, because they'll actually give you the knowledge of how exactly it's going to happen the next year. So from my awareness, it's 150 multiple choice questions. Also, there's negative marking in CLAT. So it's not like you can put, so it's, since it's multiple choice, immediately people will be like, okay, I can just do inky, pinky, ponky and just get through the entire exam. That's not, unfortunately, that's not what you can do, because it's negative marking. So for every wrong answer, you have a negative of 0.25 marks, which will be deducted. So it's very important that you pick the right marks to get higher ranking. Now, this CLAT usually consists of 5 sections. English, which includes reading comprehension. So basically what English tests your speed and your grammar. So you have to be really fast, which again, as a lawyer, is very important, a skill that you should be able to read fast, really fast. So that is one skill set that will be tested in CLAT. Current affairs, again, if you're up to date with your paper knowledge, you read your daily newspapers regularly, great. Then you already passed the current affairs. Legal reasoning, again, it's not high level legal reasoning where they ask you the section numbers and everything. It's just basic level legal reasoning. The details of which, again, I'm unaware how it's exactly done now. Maybe the pattern has changed. When I was done, it was very easy. It was general principles that most of us already know. Logical reasoning, again, it's very easy. If you have a aptitude for logical reasoning, it's not going to be very difficult. Quantitative techniques is basically mathematics, but don't be scared. Even I wasn't very good at mathematics. It's just 10th level math. So it's not very difficult. Again, it's about speed, how fast you do it. So that's pretty much it about the exam. Now, CLAT is not the only entrance, as I said. NLU Delhi conducts a different entrance exam for them. That is only AILET. That is All India Law Entrance Test. It's only applicable for NLU Delhi. None of the other law colleges accepts AILET ranks. Again, AILET is also conducted usually in May, but the dates don't usually coincide. They are aware of the fact that students who write AILET also write CLAT. So usually it's done in 2 different dates, so that wouldn't be a problem. Now, as I said before, I said some national universities have seats reserved for foreign nationals. NLU Delhi has that. So I thought that might be important for some people who might be born abroad and are nationals from there. So there are 10 seats reserved for foreign nationals. Again, that's not done through AILET, so you'll have to separately apply to NLU Delhi for that. NLU Delhi ranking is a little different. So here, probably your 12th marks will be important, because if two people get the same marks in ALET, then they take the 12th marks into consideration. So then they, if both of you have the same exact marking in ALET, then they take 12th marks into consideration and add it in, and according to that, your ranks change. It's different for CLAT. From my knowledge, CLAT doesn't take 12 marks into consideration. So if two people have a tying rank, what they usually do is they give weightage to each section. So they give legal aptitude section higher weightage. So whoever scored higher marks in legal aptitude gets the higher ranking and things like that. That's how they take it. They don't usually take 12 marks into consideration, but ALET does. So if you're appearing for ALET and you're really passionate about going to NLU Delhi, then probably you should concentrate on your 12th marks as well. Now, again, there's Kerala Law Entrance Exam, which is conducted by Commissioner of Entrance Examination, CEE. So that's for the government law colleges in Kerala. Like, for instance, Ernakulam Law College, Government Law College, Trivandrum Law College, etc. So law colleges in in Kerala, especially, others I'm not aware, probably them too, offer both 5-year and 3-year LLB courses. So that's very fortunate, because 3-year LLB courses can be opted for those people who have already taken another degree. So after their degree, they feel, okay, now I want to go to law. They can actually take a 3-year course and still save time. So that way, 3-year LLB is very beneficial. But if you're doing it right after 12th, I'll say you have to go for a 5-year LLB. You can't go for a 3-year LLB right after 12th. You need to have a degree certificate for going for the 3-year LLB. Now, again, for Kerala Law Entrance also, you need to have passed your 12th. However, the percentages are a little different. For general category, it's 45%. Socially and educationally backward class is the other name, the legally acknowledged name for OBC. It's the same. So for them, it's 42% marks, and SC and ST, it's 40% marks. Now, something that I'm sure parents might be a little interested in, what are the jobs that are available? Very, very prestigious, being a judge. So earlier, probably in my parents' age, the only way to be a judge was to first become a lawyer, practice for so many years, then your bar council to which you are affiliated has an election, and they nominate certain people to become a judge, and that's how you become a judge. Now, over the past few years, it's become a little more easier, in the sense, right after your graduation, you can still be a judge, not to a high court or Supreme Court, only to the lower judiciary, sessions court. But you can still get a head start. Right after your undergraduation, you can write the Judicial Service Examination conducted by the Public Service Commission, PSC. So they conduct an examination, which if you qualify, you straight away become a judge. So from that, so that's a head start over. So the older traditional route is still there. People still get nominated to become judges, but this is a head start for those people who don't really want to be lawyers. They don't want to waste their aim is to be a judge. They don't want to waste time becoming lawyers. So it's very easy for them now. So that is one option for job. Another is the most common thing, which I'm sure when I said I'm a lawyer, most of you must have had this image in your head, a litigating lawyer going to court, what you've seen in movies and all. So that's a very obvious choice, a litigating lawyer. Again, litigating lawyer requires to be enrolled with the Bar Council of India. I am enrolled with the Bar Council. I was enrolled with the Bar Council of Kerala. I'll tell you why I gave up my certificate in a slide or two. But yeah, so to practice in India, you need to be enrolled with the Bar Council. So if you're enrolled with any one Bar Council, so every state has their own Bar Councils, Bar Council of Kerala, if you're enrolled with Bar Council of Kerala, you can practice anywhere in India. So, but that license is required. The other option is to become a non-litigating lawyer, which I was till 2 months ago. So a non-litigating lawyer is an alternative to being a litigating lawyer if you're not interested in the procedures of the court. So what essentially they do is, again, this is a very broad term. So what I'll be telling would be a very limited understanding of that. Please don't make your complete understanding based on what I'm saying in this 5 minutes, because if you research more, if you talk to non-litigating lawyers, they'll tell you, okay, this, more options are there. So don't make your judgments based on this alone. But from my, what I was a non-litigating lawyer affiliated with a law firm, and I was a corporate lawyer. So what I essentially did was I worked on the corporate side. My interactions were with the companies. So if the companies have any problem, I didn't go to court. I don't have to go to court. Despite being an enrolled lawyer, I can still avoid the hassles of court procedures. I can be affiliated with a law firm which ensures that I get steady salary, unlike a litigating lawyer whose salary, again, depends on the amount of practice that they have. If you're a non-litigating lawyer, you can affiliate yourself with a law firm which is established and they already have a large number of clients. So you have like a fixed salary. You won't be an employee in a law firm. You will be what is called a retainer. So essentially, they are using your expertise and they're giving you salary. You are like an employee, but you're not an employee. You can have other practice also apart from this. So what I did when I was a non-litigating lawyer was I was a corporate lawyer. Companies came to me if they had to draft contracts or if they had any legal advice requirement. They came to me, I gave that to them, and the company paid me for rendering that service. So essentially, and if at all they had some court case, they came to me. I just had to do the background part of it. I just had to draft everything and give it to a litigating lawyer. The firm itself will have a litigating wing as well. So all I had to do was draft it in in my firm itself and give it to the litigating lawyer. They'll go to court and do the court procedures. So my for those people who don't want the hassle of having to go around in a court every day, they can be a non-litigating lawyer and affiliate themselves with a law firm. So that's an option. The good thing about that is you don't have to resign your bar counsel. So if you're already enrolled with your bar counsel, you don't have to suspend that. You can still, so you have the option to switch between being a litigating and a non-litigating lawyer anytime, which is an advantage. Now, the people who don't have that advantage is in-house legal associate, which is what I am now. So when I became an employee of Flipkart, what I have to do is I have to suspend my bar counsel license. I can no longer go to court. So, but suspend doesn't mean it's forever. If I want to renew it, I have to resign from Flipkart and I can renew it anytime. But for the time being, I cannot go to court. So what is the advantage of being an in-house legal associate? You are essentially, so if you are a in-house lawyer, I mean, if you're a litigating or non, sorry, am I interrupting something? Okay. So if you're a non-litigating lawyer or a litigating lawyer, you don't have any employee benefits like PF, insurance. You essentially do your savings, you will have to take care of it yourself. But if you're an in-house litigating lawyer, a legal associate, that is, every company requires a legal associate. Take any company, Infosys, Wipro, Flipkart, Amazon, all these IT companies, software companies, banks, everything requires an in-house legal associate. So you are essentially employees, just like every other employee gets a PF, insurance, and everything else, you get it as well. So your savings as such is taken care of, and all the other employee benefits like maternity or paternity or severage pay, everything will be taken care of. So that way it is good for those who want a steady job and don't want to take risks. They can be an in-house legal associate, and that also, that again gives for those who want to climb up the ladder. For some people, they have an appetite for climbing up the ladder. When you are a litigating lawyer, you can climb up the ladder by getting more salary, but there's no concept of promotion. You're not getting a promotion. But an in-house legal associate, by the end of your career, you can become a vice president legal in some companies. So if you have an appetite for getting promotions and going up a ladder that way, then you be an in-house legal associate. The only flip side is you won't be enrolled with a bar counsel. You will have to suspend your bar counsel license. Another is policy researcher. So that is again a very, very interesting subject, which a lot of my friends are part of. Here you're actually making change to the law in the country. Like for instance, Aadhaar Act or Data Protection Bill, all these, the acts that actually govern our law in India were actually created by think tanks, public or private think tanks. They work with the government and they create these bills and they hand it over to the government. So these people are actually the ones making the law. So I'm closely associated with some of the think tanks. Like for instance, Center for Law and Policy Research is run by Sudhir Krishnaswamy. Sudhir Krishnaswamy was my professor in Azim Premji University. He is now the Vice Chancellor of NLSIU Bangalore, the NLU in Bangalore. So he runs a think tank called Center for Law and Policy Research, which again does legal draftings. Vidhi is a very famous legal think tank, which did the Aadhaar Act and the Data Protection Act. So there are private think tanks as well as public think tanks. So that is a very lucrative and a very interesting job opportunity, being a policy researcher. Another one is Judge Advocate General. Its acronym is JAG. We usually call it JAG. A couple of my friends are actually there. So that is the legal department for the military. So the military does not adhere to the laws of the other. We are called civilians for a military man. A military man calls us civilians. We civilians go to the normal courts. However, the military have a separate court for themselves. When I say court martial, I think you might be more aware of that. You see that in movies and all. So yeah, court martial is part of this procedure where they have a separate court for their affairs. So if a military man commits a crime, he doesn't go to a normal court, he goes to the court of the military service. And in order to get into that, become a lawyer or judge there, you need to pass. So it's very rigorous. There are like 2-tier levels of interview. There are tests, physical tests and medical tests that you have to qualify. It's very rigorous. It's not easy to get into that, but it's obviously very prestigious. If you get into that, it's obviously a very prestigious job. It takes a lot of traveling for those people who love traveling and are not committed to the idea of having a home. If you're with the military in JAG, you can't really settle down anywhere till you retire. You have to travel. But those people who love traveling and seeing new places, it's a great job opportunity. So that's again there. Then academician. Every field requires academician. Again, lawyers also need professors. So that is again a very important and a very attractive option. For being an academician, you need to qualify the national eligibility test to get into being an assistant professor. Now, again, if you want to get into research also, it's very useful to write NET, National Eligibility Test, because if you come in the top ranking, like what Noel was saying earlier, you get a grant. So scholarships are always good. If you're doing research, it's always good to have scholarship instead of spending it all out of your pocket. So you get, if you're in the top ranks of NET, you get Junior Research Fellowship, JRF, by which you can actually apply for grant and get grant from the government. So you can do research, MPhil and PhD using the government grant. So that you can do if you're doing research, or if you want to be a assistant professor, you can write NET, crack through NET, and then you can become an assistant professor. But however, you can't write NET soon after your undergraduation. That is, if you just get your BA LLB, you won't be able to write NET. You have to complete your post-graduation. Now, that's actually it. So I'm done with my presentation. If there's any question, please ask me.
Thank you, Sneha. Thank you for going into the intricacies and the technical details.